Okay, so we're going to be looking at homework 5. So this is the first problem. So we're asked to verify that the derivative of arcsecant of x is equal to 1 over x square root x squared minus 1. And this is for x positive. So it turns out there's some subtleties if we want to consider x negative as well, but we're just going to ignore those in this problem and only worry about positive x values. So the idea of this problem is that we can use this trick that we covered for finding derivatives of inverse functions. So in particular, we know that secant of arcsecant of x should be equal to x because the secant and the arcsecant cancel out. So now we can take the derivative of both sides of the equation. So the derivative of secant of arcsecant of x is equal to 1. What's the derivative of secant of arcsecant of x? Well, we know the derivative of secant is tangent squared, but then by the chain rule we also have to multiply by the derivative of the function which is on the inside, but that's exactly the derivative we want to find. So what we get is that tangent squared of arcsecant of x, sorry, I've made a mistake. The derivative of secant is not tangent squared, so I was thinking of derivative of tangent is secant squared, but the derivative of secant is secant of x times tangent of x. So we have secant of arcsecant of x times tangent of arcsecant of x times the derivative of arcsecant of x, and this should all be equal to 1. So if we rearrange this here, of arcsecant of x is equal to 1 divided by secant of arcsecant of x, just gives us x, and then we have tangent of arcsecant of x. Well, this is close to what we wanted. Essentially all that's left to show is that tangent of arcsecant of x gives us this square root x squared minus 1. So let's take a look at this. So suppose that that arcsecant of x is equal to some angle theta. Well, then if we take secant on both sides, we know secant of theta is equal to x. Well, what's secant? It's 1 divided by cosine. So this means that 1 over cosine of theta is equal to x, which implies, if you remember, cosine is adjacent divided by hypotenuse. So this means that hypotenuse divided by adjacent is equal to x divided by 1. So we can draw a triangle with this angle theta here. The hypotenuse should be x, the adjacent side should be 1. Now if we use Pythagorean theorem, then we'll get that this is the square root of x squared minus 1. So now what did we want to find? We wanted to find tangent of this thing. Well, tangent of theta is equal to opposite over adjacent, which is equal to square root x squared minus 1. So using this, we can go back to our equation up here, and tangent of theta is the same as tangent of arcsecant. So we get that this is equal to 1 over x square root x squared minus 1. So we verified that we get what we want for the answer.